Okay, today's daf is daf Kuf Nun Vav, second to last daf. It'll be our last shiur of Masechet Shabbat in this way. We'll be finishing tonight at the Siyum, 8:30 tonight, Israel time, and everywhere else depending on your time zone. I'm looking forward to you all joining. I know a bunch of people have said they didn't get the link. Not to worry, the link will be sent out to whoever wrote emails later this morning, and the link will be up on the website. I think it's going to be on the banner where it says right when you open the home page, talks about the Siyum. There'll be a link right there to the Zoom. You can get in that way. You can also get in through Facebook Live. For anyone who can't, as I mentioned, it'll be on video. You could see it on Facebook. You can also, which apparently will be able to access even if you're not a part of Facebook. And also it'll be up on our site by tomorrow, hopefully in the morning. And the shiur, if you can't listen, I'm going to post the shiur also. Just the last part will be posted like a regular post. So you can listen to the podcast in the regular way that you might listen to the podcast generally if you can't make it. We're very excited. Over 500, maybe even 600 people already are registered for Sunday night's event in addition to the people coming to Monday night's event. It's really, the interest is amazing. Really looking forward to seeing everyone tonight. Okay, with that, we're going to start the end of our Masechet. And again, if you have any questions, someone will be available also during the event to deal with technical questions. If you have, you can email info@hadran.org.il if anybody has any sort of issues. Hopefully we'll be able to resolve them. Okay, there's a sheet up for today. I didn't see if someone put it up in the chat. How long will the event be? It'll be approximately an hour, maybe a little bit longer than an hour, but not much more than that. Okay, we're going to start now at the very bottom of Kuf Nun Hamud Bet, and as I mentioned, we're going to get through to the Mishnah, okay, the Mishnah on Kuf Nun Zayin. So we have a lot to do, okay? There's a sheet for today that'll help organize part of the daf, and there's a whole bunch of interesting stories that we're going to get to later. Tanu Rabbanan, Ein govlin et hakali v'yesh omrim govlin. Very bottom of Kuf Nun Hamud Bet. Our dedications for today. Okay, two dedications. Today's daf is dedicated in memory of Meir Penstein, Meir Yosef and Avraham Ve'eta Zichrono Livracha, a close family friend who loved to learn Torah, who passed away just this past week. And our daf is also dedicated by Racheli and Yaakov in honor of Deborah Asheim on the occasion of her birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. We love and miss you. Kol hakavod in your Daf Yomi journey. Love, Cheli and Yaakov. Okay, we're going to start again from Tanu Rabbanan, Ein Govlin et Hakali v'yesh omrim govlin. So man yesh omrim. So we have here about, if you remember, okay, first of all, we have to say what is kali. Kali is this type of seeds that they would roast, grains of wheat that they would sweeten. They would roast them and they'd be sweetened and they would make a sweetened flour out of them. And then the question is, can you mix them with water? Okay, is that considered the malacha of lash, kneading, that we talked about the other day or yesterday? So some people say no, some people say yes. Man yesh omrim, who's the yesh omrim? And this matches the opinions we saw in yesterday's daf. Amar Rav Chisda, Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda who said that you can do this. But Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda only allows it if you do it in a different way than you normally do it. Okay, this is like oatmeal. Okay, where you don't actually make a batter out of it, but it does thicken as you make it. So how do you hechi mishane? Rav Chisda al yad. You use your hands rather than using a utensil to mix it. So it reminds us of things we saw earlier in the Masechet about borer with a kli, by hand, how we make distinctions. Vishavin, but everybody agrees, shebochatin et hashatit b'Shabbat. You're allowed to mix shatit. Now shatit is also like a type of oatmeal mixture. Here it says everybody agrees that you can mix it. So this is strange. Didn't we just say you couldn't? And here it's the same type of thing. Rashi explains that the kali was you would mix this sweetened flour with oil, water, and salt. This seems to be something you mix with honey. Okay, but the same type of thing. You're mixing the same kind of sweetened flour. You can do it on Shabbat. And everyone agrees, even Tanakama. This shotim zeytuma mitzri. This is a non sequitur. Also, they all agree that you can drink this zeytuma mitzri, which was something people use for medicinal purposes. But if you remember, this is good review, since people also drank it under normal circumstances, even though they're also drinking for medicinal purposes, that type of medicine is allowed. The ha'amart ein govlim. So now they say, how could you say they all agree that you can bochashim et hashatit? Didn't we say ein govlim? which is mixing it, basically. So they say, lo kasha ha ba'ava ha beraka. The consistency is different. If it's thick, then it's like a dough. And then Tanakama says, no, you can't. But if it's thin, then even Tanakama agrees that it's okay. But everyone agrees it has to be done with some sort of different, with a shinoi, with a change. Now we learn they was sometimes also made with vinegar. On a normal day, you normally put in the vinegar, and then you put in the flour-like substance. On Shabbat, you have to do it in the reverse order. And that's how you do it in some sort of changed way, and then it's okay. He saw the guy in his father's house kneading, the kneader. He was the guy in charge of kneading. Okay, maybe they had a lot of servants, and he was called the kneader. So he saw that he was mixing this. Generally, this mixture was used for animals. He saw that he was mixing up this mixture of the shatita for the animals, or some sort of, I don't know if it was shatita, but it was something where he was actually mixing it up. And he was shoving it down the mouth of the animal. So now, what do you see? Two problems, right? One is he was kneading the mixture and mixing it. And two is he was shoving it down his throat, which goes back to what we saw the other day about not force-feeding animals. So now he says, batashbe. So he kicked him and, said, you can't do that. Ata avua. Now, remember, he was in his father's house, and he starts looking at the person working in the house and starts criticizing him. So the father shows up and says, Amrle hachi amar avuchti imech. But your grandfather, your mother's father, used to say, Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav, Umanu, and who was his mother's father? Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. And he said in the name of Rav, Govlin v'lo maspin. You can mix up this fodder, but lo maspin, you can't shove it down the animal's throat. Udelo latish b'lishne mahal ketinle. But remember the difference between to shove it down their throat to a place where it can't come back up, or to just put it in his throat. So he says you can't shove it all the way down, but if there's an animal who can't eat on his own, then mahal katin, then you can put it in its mouth. Okay, not shove it down its throat, but you can't put it in its mouth. And apparently that's what the person was doing, and therefore he said, but out of my business, what he's doing is just fine. You can imagine the scene with the father and the son, and this is like when kids sometimes, I don't know, in some places they go to Israel for the year, they start learning all these things, they come home and tell the parents what you're doing is wrong, and then parents say, no, we have a custom, this is what we do, right? This is not a problem, this is our family minhag. It's basically what's going on. Amar Rav Yemer bar Shlemia Mishmei Abaye. Sorry, I skipped one thing. V'hanei milei hu demishane. As long as you do it with some sort of difference, again, we're back to the govlim, the mixing. So they say, hey, mishane, how do you do it differently? Amar Rav Yemer bar Shlemia Mishmei Abaye, shti ve'erev. You mix it, instead of normally we mix in a circular motion, you mix like in an X or a plus sign, right? You go one way and then you go the other way, the same way you do the weaving. So then they say, V'halo ma'arev shapir, but that's not very effective if you mix in that way. Amar Rav Yehuda minaro lekli. What do? You do shti and arev, you kind of go once like that, and then you pour it back and forth into one utensil, then back to the other, and in that way it gets mixed up. So that's your shino. Okay, and from here we're going to get off on a big tangent soon. First, we're going to say it was written in, it's a very interesting thing, we haven't seen this yet before, it was written in Ze'eri's notebook. He had a notebook, and in his notebook was written the following thing, right? Normally, everything's passed down orally. Here we see something was written. So now they say, K'tiva Pinkasei Ze'eri, Amarit Kadam Rabbi. It was said in front of Rabbi, Umaru Rabbi Chia. Who was this? Rabbi Chia, or I said in front of Rabbi. Who was my Rabbi? Rabbi Chia. Mahu legabel. Are you allowed to do gibel? Can you mix up this fodder? Amar Asul. He said, no, you can't. Mahu lefarek. I asked him, okay, all this is written in his notebook about the following encounter he had. So what about lefarek? Lefarek has two possible explanations given in the commentaries. One is, are you allowed to take food from in front of one animal and move it to in front of a different animal? This is all we talked about. Once you already designate for one animal, right, is a tircha yatera to move it for another animal. So can you do that? Or some people say it means to take off something heavy that was on the animal, that you're allowed to do that. But it makes more sense in terms of the continuation to say that has to do with moving food. And the simple meaning of the word, generally the farek means to take off a burden off the animal. But from the context, we'll see the other explanation seems to make more sense. So Amar Mutal, he said that you're allowed to do. So remember, we talked about anything that has to do with food, you're allowed to do. When I see Tova asked about tsar balei chayim, I assume you're talking about shoving the food down the throat. Is that your question, Tova? Yeah. So then again, we said if the animal needs help eating, then it's okay. You're actually helping the animal. And the assumption was when you're shoving it all the way down their throat, that's either tirchiyatera or maybe also tsar balei chayim. But if it's helping the animal, because the animal can't eat otherwise, or you want to make sure the animal has food for the long term, then there's certain circumstances where we would allow that. Okay, so anyway, back to this case. Amar Rav Menashe, chad kamei chad, tre kamei tre shapir dame. You can put 1 unit of food in front of 1 animal, 2 units of food in front of 2 animals. That works. But tzlatat kamei tre asur. You can't start bringing 3 bundles in front of 2 animals. If each animal, we assume, eats about a bundle's worth, you can't bring any extra food. Okay, he says that's allowed. Rav Yosef Amar, kav afilu kabayim. Okay, that's what Rav said, Rav Menashe said. But Rav Yosef said, no, you can bring even a kav, even 2 kavs. That's already a lot more. And then we're going to see Ula Amar, kor afilu kurayim. Anything for food is allowed for animals. You can bring a ton of food, even if the animal doesn't necessarily need all that food. You're allowed to bring all that food in front of the animal. Okay, that was the first pinkas. We're going to have 3 pinkasim. The third one's going to be our tangent. Okay, this is going to be a very interesting tangent. K'tiva pinkasei de Levi. Amarit kadam Rabbi. I said before my rabbi, again, this was written in Levi's pinkas. First we had Ze'eri's notebook, now we have Levi. I said before Rabbi Umanu, who's that Rabbi? Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Al dahavu gavlin shetita beBavel. That I talked to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi about the fact that people are mixing this shetita in Bavel. V'havat savach Rabbi, and Rabbi was screaming at them and saying, you can't do this. Umanu, who is this Rabbi? Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Again, he says this to Rabbi, and it was about Rabbi. He was screaming at the people, Al dahavu gavlin shetita. But late deshmiale, nobody listened to him. But late chela b'yade lemesar. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Very interesting line. He didn't have the power. This Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the real great rabbi, he didn't have the power to stop the people. And why is that? Because there was an opinion that matired it. This is very interesting because the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda existed, who said you can be megabel shetita, even though the rabbi said you can't. Remember, we're talking here about the thick mixture because the thin they all agreed about. But when you make a thick mixture, so Rabbi thought you shouldn't be allowed to do it, but because Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda said you could, basically he couldn't stop the people from doing it. Okay? So next one, and here comes our really interesting tangent we're going to get off on. K'tiv a pinkasei de Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. And his pinkas, it said, Hi man de b'cha b'shaba, if you're born on Sunday, the first day of the week, yihi gavar v'lo chadabe. You're going to be a person that doesn't have one thing in him. Okay, what is one thing? They assume it means one trait. So my v'lo chadabe, what does this mean? Ilema v'lo chad letivo, if it means you don't have one good attribute to you. V'hama Ravashi ana b'cha b'shaba have. Ravashi said, I was born on Sunday. Elalav chad lebishu, so maybe it means you won't have one bad trait in your body. V'hama Ravashi ana v'dimi bar kakusta havim b'cha b'shaba. Ana melech v'ua v'resh ganve. Ravashi also said on a different occasion that me and Dimi bar kakusta, we were both born on Sunday, and I'm a good person. I'm the head of the yeshiva. I'm a melech. I'm in charge of a lot of people. And he is the head of the robbers. So what do you see? You can't say there's no good and you can't say there's no bad. Here we have someone with all good and someone with all bad. So how do we understand this? Here comes the answer. Ela I kule letivu, I kule lebishu. You're either going to be all good or all bad. And why is this? My taima, okay, it's whether you read this or not, but I'm going to read it because some people have the gersa, some people don't. De ivrube or v'choshech, because on the first day of creation, light and darkness was created. What do you see here? This is a day of contrast and clear black and white. You're either all good or all bad. Okay, first we have to go back for a minute. I just wanted to finish the first part of this to then go back and talk about what we're discussing here. So we're now going to talk about, and this sounds a lot like horoscopes and things like that, and you have to understand that people believed a lot in astrology in those days. Certainly in Babylonia, it was very common, and we're going to see how the rabbis talked about this and what they did with it, okay? And it's going to be a little confusing because we don't really believe in this stuff. On the other hand, it seems like the rabbis did have some sort of belief in it. And this is really going to take us toward the end of a bit of our daf, about this idea of the constellations and the power of days of the week or what constellation you were born in and how it affects you. So right now, we're just going to go through it and we'll talk about the questions soon. So born on the first day of the week, They're either going to be all good or all bad, and this is all going to be based on creation of the world. Okay, how the world was created, on what day each thing was created, and how that affects people who were born on it. You have a gazan. If you were born on the second day, you're going to be an angry person, get into fights with people. My time because the water separated from the heavens, so it's talking about you separate yourself from other people by fighting with them. If you learn born on Tuesday, yehegever atir, wealthy, vizana yehe, and you'll be full of promiscuous activity. My time mishum de'ivru asavim. What happens with asavim? They grow and they mix. In fact, it's right interesting. We talked a lot about kilayim, separating things. But if you let things grow naturally, they're going to all join together, and that's znut, right? Where everybody is pirei rovei b'yachad, right? We have this, the reproduce, just like the grass and all the crops. Haiman de ba'arba b'shaba. If you're born on Wednesday, yehegever chakim v'nahir. You'll be an enlightened, wise person. Because my time because the lights were created, right? The sun and the moon and all those that light up the world. What do you notice here, by the way? It's interesting. Just hit me right now. The first 3 days, the first day maybe could be good or bad, but the second and third day are bad. And then when you get to Wednesday already, it starts to get good. This is like how the beginning of the week is connected to the previous Shabbat, and the end of the week, starting from Wednesday, it already is kind of leading to Shabbat. And if you think of it, it's leading toward creation of man and then God resting. So maybe that's also why the later part of the week, it's viewed as more positive. So now what happens on Thursday, yehegever gomel chasadim, you're going to do good deeds. Why is that? My time that are basically get their food through the goodness of God, right? God makes their food easy to get. We talked about that the other day, the difference between the dogs, where they don't have food easily accessible. If you're born on Erev Shabbat, yegever chazran. You're going to be someone who's busy seeking things. Okay, what are you seeking? You're going to be seeking mitzvot, because what does everybody do on Friday? They're getting ready for Shabbat, right? Your whole day Friday, right? Sometimes for some people it's the most difficult day, but think about it, you're always dealing with a mitzvah, right? Your whole goal on Friday is get ready for Shabbat. So again, depending on, it's a little easier in Israel when you're not working on Fridays, but in general, part of your day Friday anyway is geared toward getting ready for Shabbat. Haiman de b'shabta yehe, b'shabta yamut. If you're born on Shabbat, you're going to die on Shabbat, which sounds a little bit of a bad thing. We'll see in a minute. Ta'achilu alohi yom rabba de shabta, because people desecrated Shabbat when you were born, and therefore you're going to die on Shabbat. But it seems like actually there's a positive thing, because dying on Shabbat is viewed as positive. We're going to see it right now. Amar Rava bar Shila, ukadisha Rabbi Yitkari. It's going to be considered a big kavod to die on Shabbat. And maybe the whole idea is that they were mechalel Shabbat. Sometimes to keep Shabbat, you have to be mechalel Shabbat, right? The idea of they were mechalel Shabbat so that you could keep Shabbatot Harbeh. Remember we talked about that? That's why you can be mechalel Shabbat for a tinok ben yomo, a one-day-old baby, so that he can in the future keep Shabbatot. Sometimes desecration of Shabbat is viewed as, right, it's needed, and therefore it becomes almost a positive thing. I want to say how important it is sometimes to desecrate Shabbat. Amalahu Rabbi Chanina. Poku the Amrule Labar Levi, go tell Ben Levi. Okay, who's Ben Levi? This is Rabbi Yeshua Ben Levi, who we just read his whole Pinkas, what it said about what day of the week you're born and how that affects what kind of person you're going to be. I know you might be struggling with this concept. We're going to talk about it more later, don't worry. So, right, because this sounds like determinism, right? Everything is predetermined. What type of person you're going to be is predetermined from the beginning. Sounds like we don't really have much control over it, which is kind of antithetical to what we believe about Judaism, right? That it's in your own hands to change things. So hold off. So now Rabbi Chanina goes against Bar Levi. Now you might think he's going to say this is baloney. We don't believe in the stars, but instead he says no. Lo mazal yom golem, ela mazal sha'a golem. It's not what day you're born; it's what hour you're born. And if you remember on Kuf Kaftet, we had this whole discussion about the different constellations. If you remember the bloodletters, you're not supposed to bloodlet on certain days of the week because you shouldn't do it when certain the what do you call them? The constellations. If you remember, every hour there's a different constellation that's ruling, and depending on whether they're day and night, and there was a whole thing there about how it works. So here also we're going to say it depends which constellation. There'll be 7 constellations, and each one is in charge for an hour, and it basically goes right in this order. There's a nice chart in the Koren on today's daf, and in the Schottenstein, it's back on Kuf Kaftet, the chart. So anyway, without going into all the details, but now we're going to say it just depends which which constellation is in charge when you're born, and that affects your destiny. So he's still into this idea that there's something predetermined, but he says it's based not on the day, but on the mazal. So now let's see. If you're born when the sun is ruling, zavitan, you'll be a radiant person. Right? Basically, you're going to be like the sun. What's the sun? The sun is radiant. The sun is out there during the day. That's his time to rule. He doesn't come into the nighttime. He doesn't shine at nighttime. So you're going to eat your own food, drink your own drink, okay? All going to be yours. All your secrets are revealed. And if you try to rob someone, you're not going to be successful because the sun is open to everybody. Everyone can see everything. If you're born in Venus, you'll be rich, like we saw before, and full of promiscuous activity. Because Venus is associated with Motzei Shabbat, and Motzei Shabbat is associated with when the fire was born, and fire is associated with desire. So you're going to have this burning fire of desire in you, which is going to, I guess, bring wealth and also promiscuous activity. If you're born in Mercury, you'll be a wise, an enlightened and wise person. They understood already that Mercury was closest to God, closest to the sun. Sorry, you're going to be a sofer of the sun. It's going to be like you're his right hand man, basically. And therefore, because of that, you're going to have the intelligence and the radiance from the sun. If you're born in the moon, time of the moon, you're going to suffer pain because what happens to the moon, right? It gets weaker and then stronger again, right? If you look at it, smaller, bigger, weaker, stronger. So you're going to suffer pain. Banai v'satir, satir banai. You're going to build and destroy and build because it waxes and wanes. Achil delo delay v'shate delo delay. You're going to eat and drink things that aren't yours because the moon comes out when it's the sun's time, right? He tries to get in there. Okay, the razoi kastya, now you can't see the moon always, so your secrets are hidden. Iganav mitzlach, and therefore, if you rob someone, you'll be successful. Okay, Shabtai is Saturn, and it comes from the root Shabbat. Now, Shabbat is also Shabbat, but it's also to cancel. Like you can say like your loans are canceled on Shemitah. No, well, that's Shmot, but Shabbat also means to stop. Okay, and to cancel out. So what you intend to do is going to be canceled out, won't work. Some people say it in a positive way. What other people think about you are going to be canceled, nullified. Okay, and tzedek is, I forgot, what's tzedek? I thought it was, wait, I'm confusing now. Tzedek is, remind me, Jupiter, right. Tzedek, okay, Jupiter. So if you're born in Jupiter, geveret tzadkan, you're going to be a righteous person. Some people say this means you're going to give tzedakah, and some people say it just means you're righteous in mitzvot. You're going to be someone who spills blood, because madim is associated, Mars is associated with blood. Either you're going to be a bloodletter, or you're going to be a robber who kills people, like one of those, muggers. Tabacha, or a butcher, or a mohel who does the brit milah. Okay, now what do you see from here? So first, let's go one more line. I'm a rabba, ana b'madim havai, but I was born in Mars, and I'm not any of those people. I'm Rabbi, mar nami anish v'katil. You punish people and kill people. Now, I don't think he really means kill, but in a figurative sense, because you punish people. Remember, we just saw how Rabbi said everybody hated Rabba because, right, and we understood it because he was rebuking the people. He says that's basically like having blood on your hands. Okay, so this is Rabbi Chanina's approach, that the mazalot have effect on what you do. But if you notice, there's a way to understand this even in a different kind of sense, which is saying that they have effects on what kind of person you're going to be. Like even the shofech damim, it's the perfect example. You could be a bloodletter, which is a positive way to be shofech damim. And you could be, there's all sorts of things that one could do that have to, you might be inclined to be a particular way, right? We all have our own nature, and we can all agree with that, right? You're born with a particular nature, you're born in a particular way, but you have the ability to take that. It's kind of like what Rav Ashi said, right? He's the head of the Ganavim, and I'm the head of the yeshiva. And it reminds us of the Rish Lakish story, where he was the head of the Ganavim and then became a big Talmid Chacham. So it's a matter of channeling your energies. We have the control to take our nature and do something positive with it, okay? But he does say you are born with a particular nature that can't really be so much changed, right? And it depends on when you're born, and that's affected by the stars. So that's his approach. Now we're going to see those who disagree with him. So Amar Itmar, it was said that the following machloket exists between Rabbi Chanina, who we just read, and Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chanina Omer, Mazal Machkim Mazal Ma'ashir V'yesh Mazal Yisrael. Okay, the constellations have power, and those powers affect the Jewish people. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ein Mazal Yisrael. He seems to agree that there is such a thing as the effect of constellations, but it doesn't hold true for the Jews. The Jews are not associated with mazalot. Okay? They're above this, and this is because we have God and mitzvot, and that overrides anything that, right? So the question is, does he think there's no such thing? Does he think that we can overcome, right? How to view this is a good question, but he says, Ein mazal Yisrael. But as the Rabbi Yochanan l'tamei, and he goes according to his approach, as we see, he says elsewhere, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, minayin she'en mazal Yisrael. How do we know this? Shene'emar, k'amar Hashem al derech hagoyim al tamadu. Don't learn from their ways. Ume'otot hashamayim al techatu. Don't be scared from the signs you see in the heavens. Ki yechatu in the stars. Ki yechatu hagoyim mehem, because the goyim, the non-Jews, are scared of those signs. So what do we derive from here? Hem yechatu v'lo Yisrael. They'll be fearful of them, not us, because they don't affect us, basically. Rav Savar Ein Mazal Yisrael. Also, Rav held. Okay, now we're going to have a whole list of people that didn't think that this was true for the Jewish people. Tamar Rav Yudah Amar Rav Minayin she'en Mazal Yisrael Shneimar v'yotzei oto achutza. God takes Avram outside to look at the stars. Amar Avraham Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right, and he says your children are going to be plentiful like the stars in the sky. Avram says, Ribbono shel olam, ben beti yoresh oti. Who's going to inherit me? I don't have any children. Right, my servants. Amar lo lav ki im asher yetzei mime'echa. No, you're going to have children. I looked up at my stars. And I saw in the stars that I'm not going to be able to have a child. It says, get away from the stars. Don't look at the stars because that doesn't affect you. What do you think? That Jupiter is in the Ma'arav, is in the east, is in the west. I can move it to the east. In other words, I control the stars. Because I control the stars, I can basically change your destiny. Who is the one who wakes up the east? He can call tzedek, and tzedek will come to his feet, meaning God can overpower all of this. Okay, now we're going to get into some really interesting stories. Some of them might be familiar to you. They might not be. In any case, these are very, very fascinating stories. My daughter told me last night that one of these was on the Bagrut in Safrut in Israel. They have their matriculation exams. One of these stories appears. Anyway, let's start learning the stories. Shmuel and Avlet were sitting. We're going to learn that Avnet was one of these non-Jews who looked up at the stars. He was an astrologer. And he said, Shmuel, so we're going to see from this story that Shmuel didn't think there was Mazal Yisrael. So they were sitting, and there was a person that was walking to the river. Amarle Avlet l'Shmuel. Okay, he was going apparently to cut some reeds from there. Avlet says to Shmuel, Hi Gavra Azav v'lo ate. That person's going to go, and he's not going to come back. Tarik lechivya v'mayit. A snake is going to bite him, and he's going to die. Okay, he saw it from the stars. That's going to happen. Amarle Shmuel, Ibar Yisraelu. If he's a Jew, that person, Azil va'ate. He's going to go, and he's going to come back. He's not going to die from the snake. Adiyatve, in the meanwhile, they were sitting. Azil va'ate. The guy went, and he came back, like Shmuel said. Kam Avlet. Avlet got up and said, this can't be. I saw it in the stars. Shadye letune. He throws the guy's bag on the floor, empties the contents. Eshkach bechivya depasik v'shadye betarte gove. He finds, and there were reeds. And also among the reeds, apparently when he put the reeds in, right, he found the snake cut up into two. Okay, and what he realized is this guy, without knowing, he put the reeds in the bag. And when he put the reeds in the bag, the snake was in the bag, about to come out and bite him, but a miracle happened and the reeds cut the snake. Right? Reeds generally are not strong enough to do that. So it seems like it was clearly a miracle. Amalei Shmuel, so what's Shmuel's reaction? Well, you must have done something. Again, this connects with the whole thing about the you being able to affect your own destiny. He says, "My avadid, what did you do that made this miracle happen to you?" Amarle kol yoma hava marminan rifta bahade hadade. Every day we all kind of eat bread. We break our bread together. And we eat together. Ha'idna today, hava ikachad minan. There was one among our group, delo hava le rifta. He didn't have any bread. Hava kamach michsif. He was embarrassed. He didn't have any bread. Amina lehu ana ka'imna va'arimna. He said, I'll take it, right? He says, I'm going to get up and I'm going to collect everybody's bread. Kimatai legabe, and then put it all in the basket, and then we'll eat from the basket. And that way he won't be embarrassed. So kam legabe, when I got to him, kimatai legabai, when I got to him, shavai nafshe command shakila mineh. I made it look like I was taking bread from him, so that nobody would realize that he didn't have any bread. So I wouldn't embarrass him. Amarle mitzvah avad. He said, "Well, you did a big mitzvah." Nafik Shmuel v'darash. Shmuel then darshan the following pasuk: Utstaka tatzil mimavet. And as he went and taught, tzedakah is going to save from death. Below mimavet mishuneh elami mitatzma. It's going to give you long life, okay, not from a weird kind of death, a strange kind of death. What does this mean? Well, it's based on a different Gemara, which darshans this pasuk to say. They say, what do you mean tzedakah tatzil mimavet? Everybody dies. So you can't say tzedakah saves from death. So they say what it means is instead of dying an awkward, strange death, you'll die a regular death, okay? You'll be able to die a normal, like a regular way of dying. But the way that he darshans it is, no, it's going to give you longer life. Because here you see, look, he was saved from tzedakah that he did. I see Deborah commented in the chat about that this is the week of the meteor showers in the south, and this big Persei meteor shower that's going on. It's very relevant that we're talking about the constellations. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, next story. When we do Rabbi Akiva, Nami Mazal Yisrael. Also according to Rabbi Akiva, this is the more famous story. Mazal Yisrael, de Rabbi Akiva Havale Barta. Okay, he had a daughter, Amru le Kaldai, the Chaldean, the ones who saw the stars, the astrologers said, Hahu Yoma Da'ile Lebe Ganana, on the day of her wedding, Tarek Lechivyu Meta. It sounds like one of those Disney movies, right? On the day that she gets married, she's going to be bitten by a snake and die. Hava Da'iga Amilta Tuva. He was very, very worried about this. Hahu Yoma Shakalte Lemachbenta. On that day of her wedding, she took the pin. She had like a decorative pin in her hair, an ornamental pin. Datsta Beguda. She stuck it in the wall to kind of put it in the wall to keep it there till the next morning. Itrame, okay, what happened? Etiv be'ene dechivya litzafra, and she basically poked a hole in the snake's eye. Kikashaklala, oh, sorry, I read litzafra early, 1 second. Litzafra in the morning, okay, the next day, kiavashaklale, when she took it out, hava kasarich va'atya chivya batra. She took it out. Could you imagine the way she felt it, right? She takes this out, and out comes a snake, right? Pretty horrifying. But the snake was dead. So Amar le'avua, what's Rabbi Akiva's reaction? My avadit, what did you do? I read an article written by Yonah Frankel, who's he had a great insight into analysis, literary analysis of stories. So he has a piece about this one. And he says, my avadit could be understood in two ways. Like the last story, it was very clear, he was saying. But here, he could be saying, or maybe even in the last story, you could see it in both ways. One way is to say, how did you kill that snake? And the other way is to say, what good deed did you do to cause that miracle to happen? Because why would you think he might be saying, how did you do that? Because what was he doing all along? He was worrying, right? It's fascinating, this story. I mean, there's so many interesting things, right? Basically, Rabbi Akiva, instead of doing something about it, he just sits there worrying. And you think about now, right? There's people with everything going on around. People are all, people just sit there worrying. They spend hours and hours just worrying. That doesn't get anywhere, right? That's what the story is telling you. His worrying got him nowhere. What got somewhere? She did an action, right? Now, what's interesting about her action is she had no idea the significance of her action. She was just sticking her pin into the wall, right? She didn't realize what she was doing. But sometimes just simple actions are much more effective than, sitting there thinking about things all the time. So anyway, let's read the story. Let's see even more so that she didn't realize. I think the continuation also shows that she didn't really realize the significance of her actions, although it's debatable. Anyway, let's see what happens. What did she do? So whether he meant, how did you do that? Or what good deed did you do? She understood it as, what good deed did you do? And she answers him, Amrale Bepanya, last night, Ata Anya, there was a poor person who came to the door. Kara Abava, he was knocking on the door, or called at the door. I know everyone was busy getting ready for my wedding. And nobody heard him, right? You can imagine this house full of people bustling. No one heard him at the door. Now she heard him. Shakalti liristinai, I took my portion. Yonah Frankel also says like this. He says, it's unclear whether she did it out of guilt. She realized, oh, it's all because of me, right? She felt guilty. It's because of me that this poor person is struggling and nobody's listening, so she gave her a portion. Or just because she had, she was a nice person and gave him her portion. Diyavidle, and she even says it like this. I gave him the portion that you gave me. Almost like you gave it to me. You didn't give it to the poor person. Yeah, right. Being critical of Rabbi Akiva. Yavtei and I gave it to this poor person. Amar la mitzvah avadit. Right. He said you did a mitzvah. Nafik Rabbi Akiva b'darash stakat tzil mimavet. He says just like Shmuel did. Below mimavet mishuneh elam mitatzma. Which interesting is he doesn't. You would think maybe he went immediately and did staka himself, but he doesn't. He's just talking. Right. It's all talk, worry, thoughts. But he's not acting in the story, and she's acting. What's interesting about her actions is she doesn't even realize the significance of her actions. There's another interesting thing here, which is the wall. Where's the snake? The snake is in the wall. What's the purpose of the wall? And I want to get back to this tonight at the siyum. So I'm just going to start the idea, but the wall blocks in other people from getting in, right? And that was their mistake. They put up this wall and prevented other people from getting in. And it's very reminiscent. I'll just leave it with this for right now, leave you waiting for more. But that in the beginning of the Masechet, we start out with the Balabayit and the Ani giving the food back and forth, right? So there's this connection here between the beginning of the Masechet and the end of the Masechet. And what really is going on here, though, is the idea of there's a destiny. What's clear about these stories is they believed in the stars, right? The narrator of the story, it's clear there was a snake in both stories and it was supposed to happen. But that we have the power to control our destiny, right? And it's the same thing as before. There's a destiny, a predetermined something, but we can control that and we can change it. And we have the power, and that's what's going on here. And again, we'll get back to this later at the scene. Okay, continuing. When we do Rav Nachman's third story, it's a little bit different than the other two. He also says, Ein mazal Yisrael. The image of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar le Kaldai, Baruch Yonava Have. Okay, so she heard from the people, the astrologers, that your son is going, Barech is your son, Ganava Havi. He's going to be a robber. Lo Shabbat Giluye Reshe. She didn't allow him to go without something covering his head. This is where we get the idea for wearing a kippah. Okay, yarmulke comes from here. It was clear from here that not everybody did it then. It was a custom that some people did it then, and then it developed more. It became more widespread later. Okay, you should cover your hair so that you have the fear of God upon you. So you should always remember that someone's above you. Ubai rachame, and she prayed for him. Now, lo avayade amai ka'amrele, he didn't know why. And by the way, it's all these stories, it's the same thing. The person who ends up controlling their destiny doesn't realize what they're destined for. She didn't realize there was a snake in the previous story. The guy who went to the Agam didn't realize that there was a snake in a baitim, right? And yet what's interesting about it is they didn't even know what their destiny was, and yet they were able to control it, right? By doing good deeds, that protected them from things they didn't even know were coming their way. Yom Echad, Yativ Kagaris, Tutei Dikla. One day he was learning under a palm tree. Nafal Glima Mi'ilave Reshe, his cloak falls off from over his head. It seems like he was covering his head with the cloak. Dale Eine, he picks up his head. Chaza Ledikla, he sees the tree. Now it happens he was sitting under someone else's palm tree. Alme Yitzre, his Yetzer got the better of him. His evil inclination. Salik Paske Lekibura B'Shine, and he went and he took a bunch of dates from the tree. So what does this mean? What it means is that all the while he had this thing over his head, that was protecting him. So she was able to overcome it in this way. However, when it fell off, then he succumbed. But I think what they're trying to say is this was the fulfillment. Okay, he bit him off with his teeth, right? I didn't mention the teeth part. Either which way, he basically steals them. And what's interesting here is that I think it's a way of them saying they fulfilled what the astrologer said in a very minimalist way, right? Because to take a few dates from someone's tree is not the worst thing in the world, right? It's not stealing something more major. And instead of becoming a regular serial thief, he basically, on a one-off, he took some things off a tree. And some people even say this was in his youth and that the whole thing was fulfilled in his youth. And then, it never happened after that. Okay, next Mishnah. Well, again, as I promised, we'll get back to this tonight. A lot to say about it. You can cut, we've seen this before, the gourds in front of the animals, even though gourds are generally meant for humans, but we're allowed to use it for animals according to Tanakama, which is Rabbi Shimon, who doesn't really hold by muktzah very much. And a dead animal, an animal that dies on Shabbat, which generally was right. Usually you were going to use it to eat for your own sake. You were going to slaughter it. At this point, it died on its own. It's no longer kosher, so you could give it to dogs on Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda Omerim Lo Hayta Nevela Me'erev Shabbat Asura Lefi She'ena Min Hamuchan. It wasn't dead before Shabbat, then it wasn't designated for animals from before Shabbat, and then no can do. Wasn't prepared. Itma. Now we're going to have a whole line of rabbis, Arel, Shachaz, this is the Siman, who line up Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. Okay, again, this is a great way to end the Masechet. All the while we've been talking about all these debates, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to Muktzah, when it comes to Malach Hashem, Tzurika Legufa, Davar She'ena Mitkavin, all these things. And now we're going to start saying, okay, who do we hold like? So Amar Ula halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. Rav savar halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda midekar chezuze. So Ula said we paskin like him. Rav must have held that way because he took these mats that were used. Rashi says they were used for boats to cover their. In the boats they had all their wares. It would cover their wares. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't move those, so he held that way. De Rav Aser Shmuel Shari. Rav forbade to move them, and Shmuel allowed. Va'af Levi savar halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda diha. If you brought him an animal to check, was it a treifa? After they would slaughter it, they would check. And that's what they do in shechita. They check, was the animal a treifa? Was it sick before? Because then you wouldn't be able to eat it. So when he would do that, he would only sit by the garbage dump, so that in case, in case it's not kosher, then he would just dump it in the dumpster, because otherwise, you wouldn't be able to give it to a dog because it became muktzah. Because again, if it wasn't designated from before Shabbat, then you wouldn't be able, before Yom Tov in this case, right? Before it was for human consumption. Now that after you shechted it, it might be only for animals, you can't give it to the animals. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Those are the three that hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Ushmuel amar halacha ke Rabbi Shimon. Va'av Ze'eri savar halacha ke Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so Shmuel held halacha ke Rabbi Shimon. Ze'eri also held that way. How do we know? Ditnan. It says in the Mishnah, if an animal dies on Yom Tov, you can't move it from its place. He says that's talking about an animal that was designated for a sacrifice, because an animal that's designated for a sacrifice can't be redeemed. Why can't it be redeemed? Number one, you have to have ha'amada v'haracha. Those who learn Erechim remember this. It has to be stood up to be valued, and the animal's dead. He can't be stood up to be valued. And another reason you can't is because actually forgot the reason right now. Okay, you can look it up, but there's another reason. Okay, I don't remember. But anyway, chulin shapir dami, what do you see here? That when it comes to chulin, you can do it. It's only behemat kodashim. But it sounds like if a regular animal dies on Yom Tov, then it's not a problem. Va'af Rabbi Yochanan, third person, amar halacha ke Rabbi Shimon. So now they're going to ask the classic question they always ask when Rabbi Yochanan paskin something and it seems to go against an explicit Mishnah. Remember, Umi amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi, v'ha Rabbi Yochanan halacha ke stam Mishnah. And now we're going to quote three Mishnayot that seem to say the stam Mishnah, the general opinion in the Mishnah, and an unattributed Mishnah. One of them isn't exactly unattributed, but we'll see. We're going to talk about something that's not exactly unattributed, but basically we see three Mishnayot without names, and they all seem to hold like Rabbi Yehuda. So here goes. It's none. When you light a fire on Yom Tov, you can't chop trees from beams that were used generally. Beams were generally used for building purposes, and you can't use from there. Or min ha'kolash nishbara b'Yom Tov. If you have a beam in your house that broke, none of those were designated from before Yom Tov to be used for Yom Tov purposes, and therefore you can't light the fire with them. That sounds like Rabbi Yehuda. It had to be even though they could be used for lighting a fire, Rabbi Yehuda didn't allow this. So Rabbi Yochanan, we had this exact same answer a few days ago. He holds that Mishnah isn't a stam Mishnah. It's actually attributed to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, in which case he could just say, I don't hold like him. Tashma, another Mishnah. When you start lighting your fire on Yom Tov, you can start with a pile of hay, not the trees that were set aside for building purposes and were put in this area behind the house. We talked about that the muktzah is on the gag. It was this on the roof. It was this place where they would dry out the fruits. There was also, we see now, the muktzah was also called the space behind the house where they would store things. They would store them for the long term, and that means basically he wasn't planning to use it for Yom Tov. So they say, Rashi says it's the female and the male cedar tree, which were specialized building people didn't generally burn them. They used them for building, in which case, this is what we call muktzah machmah chesron kis. And if you remember this, hafilu Rabbi Shimon modeh. That's the one case Rabbi Shimon agrees that there's muktzah. Muktzah machmah chesron kis, if it's something that's specialty item used specifically only for one thing, then we're not going to say that you're going to use that on Shabbat. That's considered set aside, even according to Rabbi Shimon. Third source against Rabbi Yochanan, ein mashkin v'shochatin et hamidbariyot, aval mashkin v'shochatin et habeitiyot. Again, on Yom Tov, you want to slaughter animals, so you're allowed to slaughter them. What can you slaughter? Well, you can give them water and slaughter them only if they're domesticated animals that are living in your house, but not ones that are out in the wild. Why is that? First of all, they would give them water because it would make it easier, if they were moist, it would make it easier to take off the hide. So you can do it only with ones that you designated, that were designated, they were in your house. So that seems to go against, and we can't give any other answer to this. So what do they answer? Well, it's true that Stam Mishnah holds like Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yochanan Stama Achrina Eshkach. He has a different Stam Mishnah that holds like Rabbi Shimon, and therefore, when there's two, well, he's able to choose one. Beit Shammai Omrim, which one is this? We learned this already. Beit Shammai says, if you have crumbs, right, things on the table like bones and peels, Magbihim me'al hashulchan atzamod uklipim, you could just pick them off the table. Beit Hillel Omrim mesaleket hatavla kula min ha'ara. You have to pick up the table and shake it, and then they'll fall off, but you can't do it directly. And if you remember, Amar Rav Nachman, Anu ein lanu ela Beit Shammai k'Rabbi Yehuda, Beit Hillel k'Rabbi Shimon. He says the shitot must be flipped, and it's Beit Hillel who actually holds that you can remove them yourselves, and that matches Rabbi Shimon, who doesn't hold by muktzah. Plige bar Rav Acha v'Ravina. Now there's a debate between Rav Acha and Ravina about who we hold like. Chanamar b'chol Shabbat, and honestly, you would have thought maybe we could end the Masechet right here. Chanamar b'kol Shabbat kula, right? It's what you've always wanted to hear the entire Masechet. Well, what's halacha l'maaseh? This isn't generally the way the Gemara works, but here they say, right? They don't usually give you very clear cut what's the halacha. He says b'chol Shabbat kula, and most people think this means on all the issues they debate, not just muktzah. Halacha ke Rabbi Shimon. We always pass like Rabbi Shimon levar mi muktzah machmat mius, except for one category. Muktzah machmat mius, if something's disgusting, what's the example? Ner yashan, if you remember, you have a candle, an earthenware vessel that's holding the candle, and it gets disgusting from the oil, that no one's going to touch on Shabbat, and even we're going to hold against Rabbi Shimon, and we're going to hold that that's muktzah. The Chanamar, one of them said, no, we hold like Rabbi Shimon in everything, not except for that one. I have a different exception. The muktzah machmat is, Chanamar b'muktzah machmat mius nami halachak Rabbi Shimon. In that case, we do hold like Rabbi Shimon. What's the exception? The vami muktzah machmat isur. It's forbidden. What's that? Ner shidliku babot Shabbat. If you lit that candle on Shabbat, that's forbidden because right? It's now prohibited to touch that because it's lit. You lit it before Shabbat. So now, you lit it right on that Shabbat. So now they say, aval muktzah machmat chesron kis. Except, just remember, there's this one exception to the rule. Afilu Rabbi Shimon modeh. We don't even need to say that we don't like Rabbi Shimon because Rabbi Shimon himself holds like Rabbi Yehuda in that case. Ditnan kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbat chutz mimasar gadol v'yated shalmach reisha. If you remember, we said all the kelim can be carried on Shabbat. This was Rabbi Shimon's approach, except for the following two, which are specialty items, right? The blade of a large saw and the blade of a plow. So those are specialty items, and even Rabbi Shimon will agree that they're muktzah. So in the end, you see that we hold like Rabbi Shimon, who holds, remember his main thing, davar she'eino mitkaven and malchus she'eino l'gufa, has to be done exactly for that purpose, right? It's all about intentionality. We're going to hear more about it at the siyum. We have Yafit, who's going to talk about intentionality throughout the Masechet. And again, as I promised, we'll get back to these stories in the siyum tonight. We'll finish here for today and pick up from the Mishnah. Have a good day, everybody.